This isn't one of those stories you hear about where a guy just vanishes one day, or where the wife just knows something is off. No, this is different. It's so much worse. I was living a perfect life, or what I thought was a perfect life. I had a husband who loved me, 2 beautiful kids, and a home that was full of warmth and laughter. My husband, Mark, was a traveling salesman on the road for weeks at a time, but he was always present. He called constantly, texted every day, sent little gifts to me and the kids. We'd FaceTime every night before bed, and he'd read our son a story and help our daughter with her math homework, all from a different time zone. He was this incredible, loving, completely devoted father and partner, even from thousands of miles away. He was the kind of husband that every woman dreams of, the kind of man who would randomly send flowers to my office just because it was a Tuesday, who would come home from a long trip and immediately scoop up the kids and start playing no matter how tired he was. He was my best friend, my rock, the person I told everything to, the person who knew me better than anyone. I trusted him with my whole life. My kids adored him. We were the ideal family, or so I thought. Looking back, there were no red flags. Not a single one. No sudden changes in behavior. No secretive texts. No suspicious credit card charges. Nothing. I was naive, I guess. I just assumed that the person you build your entire life with, the person you wake up next to every morning for 10 years, you just know them. You know their heart, their character. You know they could never do something to destroy everything you've built together. And that's why the phone call came as such a shock. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen helping the kids with their homework when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. It was a woman with a calm but serious voice. She said she was from the company Mark worked for. She said there had been an accident. My heart just stopped, dropped right into my stomach like a stone. An accident, 2 states over. I felt the world start to spin, the sound of my kids' pencils scratching on paper fading into a distant buzz. He had been in a bad car crash, she explained. He was alive, but unconscious. Critical condition. I threw my kids' jackets on, told them we had to go see their dad, and we flew out on the next available flight. The flight was a blur. My mind was racing, replaying every memory, every conversation we'd ever had. I held my kids' hands, trying to be strong for them, but inside I was crumbling. How could this be happening? When we got to the hospital, it was late. The sterile white walls, the smell of antiseptic, the low hum of the machines, it all felt surreal. I went to the front desk, my voice trembling as I said his name. Mark Williams, I said. He was in a car accident. I'm his wife, Jessica. The woman behind the desk looked at me with a kind, but confused, expression. Mark Williams? I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have a patient by that name, but his wife's name is not Jessica. My blood ran cold. What? That can't be right. I'm his wife. She pointed to the computer screen. According to his admission forms, his emergency contact and wife is a woman named Sarah. I just stared at her. My mind went blank. Sarah? Who is Sarah? I must have misheard her. Maybe it was a clerical error. A mistake. My head was pounding or ringing in my ears. I felt faint. Please, I stammered. Can you just tell me what room he's in? I need to see him. She directed me to his room, and as I walked down that long, endless corridor, every step felt heavy. I got to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. I was about to go inside, about to finally see my husband, when a woman came out of the room. She was wearing a wedding ring. She had a scared, tear-streaked face. And behind her, I saw 2 little kids, a boy and a girl, sitting in chairs, clutching teddy bears. They were the spitting image of my own children. They were his kids. And that's when I came face to face with the other family. The wife, the children, the life he had built when he wasn't with me. The other family who knew nothing about me, just as I had known nothing about them. The world I knew, the life I had, everything I had ever believed in, just shattered into a million tiny pieces right there, frozen. My kids behind me, their little hands still in mine. The other woman, Sarah, was staring at me, her eyes just as wide and confused as mine. The 2 kids, his kids, were looking at me, and then at my kids, and then back at their mom. It felt like a scene from a movie, One of those ridiculous, overdramatic films you'd never believe could happen in real life. But it was happening. To me, to my kids, to her kids. Sarah looked at me, a question in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" My mouth was so dry. I'm Jessica. I'm his wife." Her face went from confusion to pure horror. She looked down at my hand and my wedding ring and then back at my face. Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a step back as if I were a ghost. That's not possible," she whispered. "I'm his wife. We've been married for 7 years. I'm Sarah. 7 years. I'd been married to him for 10. 7 years. That meant he had been living this double life for most of our marriage. He hadn't been on the road as a salesman. He had been on the road as a husband and a father to another family." My kid started to tug on my jacket. "Mommy, who is that?" my son asked, pointing at the other kids. I couldn't answer. I just couldn't. I looked at the little boy and the little girl. They looked so much like my own children, like miniature versions of my husband. It was like I was looking at a funhouse mirror reflection of my own life. I don't know who spoke first after that. Maybe it was one of the doctors. They had seen the two families, and I think they knew what was happening. They tried to separate us to lead me and my kids away. But I couldn't move. I just couldn't. I had to know. Where do you live?" I managed to ask Sarah. She looked at me, bewildered, as if she couldn't comprehend the question. "We live here, in this town." And that was another gut punch. He hadn't just built another family. He'd built it in a place he traveled to for work. He had a home here. He had a whole life here. And he had a home and a life with me. The shock was a physical thing. It was like a wave that crashed over me, pulling me under. I felt like I was drowning. My head was spinning. My legs felt weak. I remember a kind nurse guiding me to a chair, and I just collapsed into it, my kids clinging to me. Sarah and her kids were taken to a different waiting area. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the reality of the situation slowly, painfully sinking in. My husband, the man I loved, the father of my children, was a complete stranger. Every text, every call, every "I miss you" and "I love you" was a lie. He was an incredible actor, a master manipulator. He had lived this double life with such skill and precision that not one single person in either of his worlds had a clue. How was that even possible? He had to have a burner phone, a fake email, a whole separate financial life. The layers of deception, they were staggering. My kids were scared. They didn't understand what was happening. They just knew their dad was hurt, and now there was this other lady and other kids who looked like them. "Mommy, is Daddy going to be okay?" my daughter asked, her voice small. I don't know, honey," I said, the words catching in my throat. "I just don't know." The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, sitting in a hospital, hoping for the recovery of a man who had completely betrayed me, who had systematically lied to me for 7 years. But he was still the father of my children, and I couldn't just stop caring about him. I thought about his family, my in-laws, his parents, his sister. They loved me. They had always treated me like one of their own. Do they know? Was this a secret they were all in on? The thought made me sick to my stomach. No, it couldn't be. They had always seemed so genuine. The doctor came out a little while later. He said Mark was stable, but still in a coma. He was on a ventilator. He wasn't going to be okay, not for a long time. And as he spoke, I realized that I was looking at my husband, and he was just an empty vessel. The man I thought I knew was gone. Maybe he never existed in the first place. And then, just as the doctor was about to leave, he said something that made me freeze all over again. "Mrs. Williams, we've had a lot of questions about his legal and financial affairs. There's another Mrs. Williams on the hospital forms as Sarah Williams. Are you two related?" I looked up at him, and all I could say was, "We are just staring at the floor." My kids were quiet, their little hands still gripping my knees. They could feel the tension, the something is very wrongness of all. The world around me had just stopped, like I was an alien dropped into this bizarro world, trying to figure out the rules. Then I saw her, Sarah. She was standing a few feet away, watching me. Her kids were with a volunteer, coloring in a book. She looked so much like me in that moment, but not in a physical way. She had the same look of utter, soul-crushing bewilderment. the same blankness in her eyes. She slowly walked over and sat in the chair next to me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. What was there to say? Hi, I'm the other wife. It felt so ridiculous. He told me he was a corporate consultant. She finally said, her voice a fragile whisper, that his job required him to be on the road all the time. He said he had a couple of kids from a previous marriage, that he rarely got to see them. He always seemed so sad about it. I looked at her, my blood running cold. He told me he was an only child, that his parents had passed away years ago. She shook her head slowly. He told me his family lived on the West Coast, that they were really private people. We always celebrated holidays at home, just the four of us, because he said his family was kind of distant. My family had always loved him. My parents, my sisters. He had been at every single holiday. He had been at my dad's retirement party. He was the perfect doting son-in-law. He told me his dad owned a small business and was getting ready to retire. He said he sent the money every month to help out, she said, her voice cracking. And that's when it hit me. I had to ask, how did he pay for all of this? How did he afford 2 lives, 2 houses, for kids? She looked at me, a tear finally rolling down her cheek. He bought our house in cash 5 years ago. He said he had inherited money from his grandmother. My stomach clenched into a hard, painful knot. My husband had no living grandparents. He had said he'd helped me with the down payment for our house, that his savings had gone into it. And he'd always been so careful with our money. Too careful, maybe. He'd always insisted on controlling the finances. I thought it was because he was good with money, a good provider. Now I knew the truth. He hadn't just had a second family. He had funded it with the money he stole from me. From my kids. Every birthday gift he'd bought for her kids, every vacation they had taken, every single penny he'd spent on that other life. It came from the money he'd made while being my husband. I felt it. A raw, visceral rage I had never experienced before. It wasn't just a broken heart. It was a complete violation. He had taken not just my trust, but my future. He had used me, used our children. Our life was a piggy bank he'd plundered to build a second, more exciting life somewhere else. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling. I had to call someone. I had to tell his family. Maybe they knew. Maybe they were in on it. The thought of that made my mind scream. As I scrolled to his mother's name, Sarah said something that made me stop dead. I found his laptop in the car. The police gave it to me. She pulled a small flash drive from her purse. I had a tech guy look at it. He'd set up a private account to pay for everything. She paused, her voice shaking. He didn't just have an email for me, or for you. He had an account for all of us. He even had a family calendar that had both of your kids' birthdays on it, and ours. He'd just block out the dates. He was running a scheduling program for his lies. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. He didn't just live 2 lives, he scheduled them. My kids were a checkbox on his calendar, a commitment to be juggled. My entire life, my family, my love, was just a task he had to complete between his real life and his fake one. He wasn't even a man. He was a project manager of his own deception. And in that moment, I looked at his name on my screen, and I didn't see my husband anymore. I saw a ghost, a phantom. The man I had loved for 10 years had never existed. He was a brilliant, intricate lie, a performance so perfect that it fooled not one, but 2 families. He was a character in his own play, and I had been an unsuspecting actress, playing my part perfectly, while the real show was happening somewhere else. The betrayal wasn't the other family. It was the fact that there was no real man to be betrayed by, just a monster made of Sarah and I sat in that sterile waiting room, not as rivals, but as allies in this shared nightmare. We had a brief, painful conversation where we decided to work together on this. For the kids. For our own sanity. We had to. We were the only 2 people on the planet who truly understood the depth of the deception. The 2 most important women in his life, and he had completely fooled both of us. I made the call to my in-laws, his parents. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I told them what happened. I braced for anger, for denial, for them to say they knew. But all I heard was pure, gut-wrenching grief and shock. His mother started sobbing so hard I couldn't understand her. It became clear very quickly that they had no idea. They too were victims. They were mourning the son they thought they knew, the son they had always bragged about, who had been such a good husband and father. He wasn't just lying to us. He was lying to everyone he loved. That was a strange kind of solace, I guess, knowing that the lie went all the way down, not just with me, but with his own family, too. It didn't make it hurt less, but it made me feel a little less crazy. The legal part was a complete disaster. It turned out he had two separate financial lives. One was the joint account with me, which was slowly getting drained. The other was a completely separate set of accounts that Sarah had access to, funded by what I now knew was money he had stolen from me. The whole thing was a mess. A very expensive, very painful mess to untangle. The hardest part was going home, stepping back into my house, the home we had built together, and seeing his things. His jacket on the chair, the pictures on the mantle. Every single thing felt like a prop in a play I hadn't known I was in. I felt haunted. I started seeing a therapist. It was the only way I could get through it because trying to talk about it with anyone who didn't live it felt impossible. And then came the conversation with my kids, the one I had been dreading more than anything. I sat them down, their little faces so hopeful, waiting for good news about their dad. "Daddy is going to be okay," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "But he has to stay in the hospital for a very long time to get better." They looked confused. "But when is he coming home, Mommy?" my son asked. "He won't be coming home," I said, a tear slipping down my face. "He had another family, another wife, and other kids who need him too, and he's going to stay there with them to get better. It's not because he doesn't love you. He loves you both very, very much." My daughter's eyes welled up. "He has other kids?" "Yes, honey, he does." It was a terrible, awful lie, but what else was I supposed to say? Your daddy is a pathological liar who used us all? They were too young for that. So I settled on a half-truth, a painful simplification of a devastating reality. Mark never woke up. The injuries from the crash were just too severe. He died in that hospital bed, with Sarah and her kids on one side and me and my kids on the other. It was a bizarre, surreal finality to a life of deception. We had to hold two separate memorials. My family mourned the man they knew, a loving husband and father. And I had to go through the motions, grieving for the man who was a complete illusion. It's been a few years now. Sarah and I are still in contact, not as friends, but as survivors of the same storm. Our kids know each other now. They're half-siblings, and it's a strange, beautiful thing that came out of such a dark lie. They talk sometimes, they even see each other on holidays. I finally sold that house. It was full of memories, but none of them felt real anymore. I bought a new, smaller place for me and the kids. A home that was ours, and ours alone. I got my life back, but it wasn't the one I had before. It was something new, something real. I sometimes wonder why he did it, why he went through all that trouble. The lies, the juggling, the risk. I'll never know. And that's the final part of the story, I guess. The man I loved for 10 years was a ghost. He never existed. But I do. And so do my children. And we're going to be okay. That's a truth he could never have taken from us.